The train's whistle shrieked through the Montana twilight as Catherine Hartwell stepped onto the platform of Copper Ridge, her worn carpetbag clutched in trembling hands. At 32, she'd gambled everything on this journey, sold her mother's silver, left behind her seamstress shop in Boston, crossed half a continent to meet a man who'd promised her a new life through carefully penned letters. But the moment Frederick Whitmore's eyes swept over her face, lingering on the fine lines at her corners and the silver threading through her auburn hair, Catherine knew she'd lost the wager. "You're not what I expected, Miss Hartwell." His voice carried the flat disappointment of a man appraising livestock. "Your letters said you were 30. I assumed." "Well, you look considerably older. I need a wife who can bear children, manage a household for decades to come." Catherine's throat tightened as humiliation burned through her chest. Behind Frederick stood 3 younger women, fresh off the same train, their smooth faces bright with hope. The rejection sliced deeper than any blade. She'd spent her last dollars on the train ticket. Her boarding house room in Boston was already rented to someone else. The setting sun painted the dusty street in shades of amber and shadow, and Catherine had nowhere to go. Before I continue with Catherine's journey, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Your support truly matters and motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. I'm curious, where are you listening from today? Keep the bag. Frederick's voice pulled her back to the present. "There's a boarding house 2 streets over. Mrs. Henderson might have a room." He pressed a silver dollar into her palm, with the air of a man dispensing with an inconvenience, then turned to greet the younger women with a smile that never touched his eyes. Catherine stood alone on the platform as the crowd dispersed, the coin heavy in her hand. $1 wouldn't last a week. The boarding house would want payment up front. And then what? She had no references in this town, no connections, no prospects. The mountain wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and coming rain, and she forced her feet to move. The streets of Copper Ridge were rutted with wagon tracks, lined with false-fronted buildings that seemed to lean together like tired conspirators. She passed a saloon where piano music spilled into the evening, a general store with windows full of goods she couldn't afford, a smithy where the forge's glow painted the doorway orange. At the end of the main street, she found the boarding house, a narrow 2-story structure with peeling paint and a crooked sign. Mrs. Henderson was a stout woman with suspicious eyes and flour on her apron. $2 a week paid in advance. That includes breakfast and supper, but you're on your own for midday. I only have $1. Catherine hated the tremor in her voice. "But I'm an excellent seamstress. I could do mending, alterations. I don't need a seamstress. I need rent money." Mrs. Henderson's expression softened slightly. "Listen, honey, there's a restaurant down the street, the Silver Sage. Owner's looking for a cook's helper. If you can work, you can earn your keep. Come back when you have the full $2. Catherine walked back into the darkening street, her carpetbag growing heavier with each step. The Silver Sage sat between the general store and a law office, its windows glowing with lamplight. Through the glass, she could see tables filled with miners and cowboys, the air thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of fried meat. Her stomach clenched with hunger. She hadn't eaten since morning. The door chimed as she entered. Behind the counter stood a man who made her breath catch despite her exhaustion. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of stormy sage, gray-green with flecks of gold. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with a scar that cut through his left eyebrow, but there was something gentle in the way he looked up at her, something that made her feel seen rather than judged. "Kitchen's closed for walk-ins," he said, his voice low and rough like distant thunder. "But you look like you haven't eaten in a while. Sit, I'll bring you something." "I can't pay." The admission burned her throat. "Mrs. Henderson said you might need help. I can cook, clean, whatever you need. I'll work for the meal." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her travel-stained dress, the shadows under her eyes, the desperate pride in her spine. Name's Jackson Reeves. I own this place and the ranch 10 miles north. And you are? Catherine Hartwell. She lifted her chin. I'm a good worker. I won't disappoint you. Something flickered in Jackson's expression, recognition perhaps, or understanding. He disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a plate piled high with roast beef, potatoes, and greens. The smell made her dizzy. Eat first. We'll talk after. Catherine wanted to maintain her dignity, to eat slowly and properly, but the moment the food touched her tongue, her body took over. She ate like a starving woman, because that's what she was, and Jackson stood behind the counter, cleaning glasses and pretending not to notice. When she finally set down her fork, shame flooded through her. I'm sorry. That was human. He refilled her water glass. You came in on the evening train, mail-order bride. The directness of the question should have offended her, but there was no mockery in his tone. Yes, he rejected me, said I was too old. Frederick Whitmore's a damn fool. Jackson's jaw tightened. He goes through mail-order brides like other men go through whiskey. You're the third one this year. Last girl was 17 and terrified. He sent her back because she cried too much. Catherine's hands trembled around her water glass. I have nowhere to go. $1 to my name, no references, no way back east, even if I wanted to return to nothing. Jackson was quiet for a moment, his gaze steady on her face. When he spoke, his words changed everything. I need someone at the ranch. Cook, manage the household, help with the books, room and board included plus $30 a month. It's hard work. I run cattle and horses. And I'm out on the range most days. The house is isolated 10 miles from town, but you'd be safe there, and you'd have time to figure out your next move. Why would you help me? Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. You don't know me. Because I know what it's like to have nowhere to go. His scarred eyebrow lifted slightly. And because someone who travels across the country on hope and courage deserves better than Frederick Whitmore's rejection. The offer was too good, too convenient. Respectable women didn't go off to isolated ranches with strange men. But Catherine was past the point of respectability, past the point of safe choices. She'd already gambled everything and lost. What did she have left to risk? When do I start? Tonight, if you want. I've got a room here above the restaurant. You can stay there until morning. I'll close up, take you out to the ranch at first light. Catherine nodded, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. Jackson showed her to a small but clean room upstairs, with a bed that looked like heaven and a wash basin with actual hot water. As he turned to leave, she found her voice. Mr. Reeves, thank you. He paused in the doorway, his profile shadowed. Call me Jackson, and don't thank me yet. Ranch work isn't easy, even for someone running the house. You might decide Frederick Whitmore's rejection was the best thing that ever happened to you. The door closed softly, and Catherine sank onto the bed, her mind spinning. She should be terrified, going off with a stranger to an isolated ranch. But something in Jackson's eyes had steadied her, something honest and raw and almost broken. He wasn't looking at her like she was old or desperate or used up. He was looking at her like she was a person, and that alone was worth more than gold. She woke before dawn to the sound of wagon wheels and found Jackson waiting downstairs with coffee and biscuits. The pre-dawn darkness was soft and cool as they loaded her carpet bag into his wagon, and Catherine climbed up beside him, feeling the first stirrings of something she'd thought long dead, hope. The road to Jackson's ranch wound through pine forests and open meadows, where wildflowers painted the grass in purple and gold. As the sun crested the mountains, Catherine saw the ranch for the first time. A sturdy log house with a wide porch, barns and corrals spread across a valley floor, and beyond it all, mountains that seemed to touch the sky. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's lonely," Jackson said quietly. "My wife died 3 years ago. Fever took her in the winter. I haven't had the heart to. Well, the house needs a woman's touch, needs life in it again." Catherine heard the grief in his voice, raw despite the years. "I'm sorry for your loss." He nodded once, sharp and quick, then helped her down from the wagon. Inside, the house was clean but Spartan. Functional furniture, bare walls, rooms that echoed with absence. The kitchen was large and well-equipped, and Catherine felt her fingers itch to put things in order, to make this empty space into a home. "Your room's upstairs, second door on the right. Take today to settle in, learn where things are. Tomorrow we'll start properly." Jackson hesitated, his hand on the doorframe. "One more thing. My men know you're here as my housekeeper. They're good boys, respectful. But if any of them gives you trouble, you tell me immediately. Understood?" "Understood." He left then, and Catherine stood in the center of the kitchen, surrounded by someone else's life, someone else's grief. She'd come west to be a wife, and found herself a housekeeper instead. It wasn't what she'd dreamed of on that long train ride, but it was real, and it was honest, and it was hers. The first weeks passed in a blur of work. Catherine rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Jackson and his 4 ranch hands, Tom, Miguel, James, and young Charlie, who couldn't have been more than 19. She learned to bake bread in the massive cast-iron stove, to manage the root cellar's supplies, to keep the books that tracked cattle sales and feed purchases. The work was hard and endless, but it was purposeful. Jackson was rarely in the house during daylight hours. He worked alongside his men, repairing fences, moving cattle to fresh pasture, breaking horses in the corral. But in the evenings after supper, he'd sit on the porch with his coffee, and sometimes Catherine would join him, and they'd watch the sun paint the mountains gold and crimson. "You were a seamstress in Boston?" he asked one evening, his voice easy and curious. "For 12 years. My mother taught me the trade. After she died, I kept the shop going, but the rent kept rising, and the competition." She trailed off, remembering the grinding poverty, the loneliness. "I saw an advertisement for mail-order brides, and thought it might be my chance for something different. Different isn't always better." "No," Catherine agreed, "but sometimes it is." Jackson's eyes met hers, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, of 2 people who'd both gambled on change and lost. He looked away first, clearing his throat. "You're good at this. The house feels different, alive again. Thank you." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest. "It's a good house. It deserves to be lived in properly." A month into her employment, Catherine woke to shouting. She threw on her robe and rushed downstairs to find Jackson in the kitchen, his shirt soaked with blood, his left arm hanging at an odd angle. Miguel supported him while Tom tried to staunch the bleeding. "What happened?" Catherine's training took over, her hands already reaching for clean towels. "Horse spooked," Jackson ground out through clenched teeth. "Threw me into the fence, broke my arm, might have cracked a rib. We need the doctor." Catherine pressed a towel against the gash on his forearm, feeling him flinch. "Miguel, ride to town. Tom, help me get him to the settee." "Doc's 3 hours away," Jackson said. "I've had worse." "You've also had better sense, I'd hope." Catherine's voice was sharp with worry as they maneuvered him into the front room. "Tom, bring me hot water, clean bandages, and whiskey. The good bottle, not the rot gut." Jackson's eyes met hers, slightly amused despite the pain. "Bossy, practical, now hold still." She cleaned the wound carefully, her fingers steady despite her racing heart. The gash was deep but clean, and the arm was definitely broken. Jackson watched her face as she worked, and when she looked up, she found his gaze intent, searching. "You've done this before." "My father was a drunk. Came home most nights looking for a fight. I learned to patch him up. And the words came out flat, matter of fact. Later, I learned to patch myself up. Jackson's good hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. He hit you. It wasn't a question. Catherine nodded once, then gently freed her wrist and continued wrapping his arm. That's why I left, why I thought marriage to a stranger would be better than staying. At least it would be different. Jesus, Catherine. Jackson's voice was rough with something that might have been anger or grief. I'm sorry. Don't be. I survived. That's what matters. She finished bandaging his arm and helped him drink the whiskey, then sat beside him as they waited for the doctor. Jackson's head dropped against the back of the settee, his eyes closed, but his good hand found hers and held on. Thank you, he murmured, for not flinching, for not running. I don't run anymore, Catherine said softly. I learned it doesn't solve anything. When the doctor finally arrived, he confirmed Catherine's assessment. Broken arm, cracked rib, but nothing life-threatening. He set the bone, strapped Jackson's ribs, and gave strict orders for rest. Jackson ignored most of them, insisting on reviewing the books with Catherine that evening, despite his obvious pain. You're supposed to be resting, Catherine said, exasperated, as he hobbled to his office. I'm supposed to be running a ranch. The cattle don't care if I'm injured. But he winced as he sat, and Catherine saw the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes. Then let me help. She pulled up a chair beside his desk. Show me what needs to be done. I can read and write and do figures. Use me. Jackson studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but only because I'm too tired to argue. They worked together through the evening, Catherine learning the intricacies of ranch management, which pastures to rotate, when to sell cattle, how to negotiate with buyers. Jackson was patient and thorough, and Catherine found herself fascinated by the complexity of it all. This wasn't just raising animals, it was managing an ecosystem, a business, a way of life. You're quick, Jackson said, approval in his voice. Sarah, my wife, she never had much interest in the business side, but you understand it. I ran a business for years. It's not so different. Catherine hesitated. Tell me about her, if you want to. Jackson was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he began to speak. Sarah was young, 23 when we married. I was 30. She was beautiful and sweet and wanted nothing more than to be a wife and mother, but the babies never came, and I think it broke something in her. Then the fever. His voice cracked. I couldn't save her. Doctor couldn't get here in time. She died in my arms, apologizing for not giving me children, and all I wanted was for her to stay. Catherine's throat tightened with unshed tears. Jackson, I'm so... Don't. His good hand covered hers on the desk. I'm not telling you for pity. I'm telling you because I want you to understand. This ranch, it's all I have left of her, of us, and I can't let it fail. It won't, Catherine said firmly. Not while I'm here. Together, we'll keep it running. Together. Jackson's thumb traced circles on her hand, and Catherine felt something shift between them, something warm and terrifying and achingly real. Over the following weeks, as Jackson healed, they fell into a new rhythm. Catherine managed more of the business, while Jackson supervised the physical work, and their evenings evolved into something deeper than employer and employee. They talked about everything. Her dreams of having her own dress shop someday, his hopes of expanding the horse breeding operation, the books they'd read, the places they'd never seen. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance over the meadow, Jackson turned to her with unusual seriousness. Catherine, I need to ask you something. When winter comes, it gets harsh here. Roads close for weeks sometimes. Will you stay? The question hung between them, weighted with more than mere practical concern. Catherine felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Where else would I go? You could go anywhere. You're smart, capable. You could have your own shop in town, rent a room at Mrs. Henderson's properly. You don't have to be stuck out here with—" he gestured at himself, "a broken-down widower on an isolated ranch." "You're not broken down," Catherine said quietly, "and I don't feel stuck. I feel home." Jackson's eyes searched her face in the fading light. "Catherine, don't." She touched his arm, gentle over the healing break. "Not yet. We both have too many ghosts, too much grief. Let's just be for now." He nodded, but his hand found hers in the darkness between their chairs, and they sat like that until the stars came out, two lonely people learning to be less alone. The peace lasted until October, when Frederick Whitmore rode up to the ranch with 3 of his men. Catherine saw them from the kitchen window and felt ice flood her veins. She hadn't seen him since that humiliating day on the train platform, and she'd hoped she never would again. "Jackson?" she called, her voice sharp with warning. He emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his jeans, his healed arm still slightly stiff. His face darkened when he saw Frederick. "Whitmore, what do you want?" Frederick dismounted with the air of a man who owned the world. "Heard you've got my mail-order bride working here. Come to collect her." "I'm not your mail-order bride," Catherine said, stepping onto the porch. "You rejected me, remember? Too old." "I've reconsidered." Frederick's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The other girls didn't work out. You'll do." "No." Catherine's voice was steady, despite her trembling hands. "I work for Mr. Reeves. I have a contract, a position. I'm not going anywhere with you. Don't have much choice, sweetheart. I paid for your train ticket. That makes you mine until the debt's settled." Jackson moved to stand between them, his body a wall of protective fury. "She doesn't owe you anything. Now get off my property before I make you leave." "That a threat, Reeves?" Frederick's hand dropped to his gun. "Because I brought enough men to make sure this goes my way." The other ranch hands, Tom, Miguel, James, and Charlie, emerged from various buildings, their own hands near their weapons. The tension crackled like lightning before a storm. "Not a threat," Jackson said quietly. "A promise. Catherine is under my protection. She stays. Your protection." Frederick laughed, ugly and knowing. "That what you're calling it? Everyone knows you've had her living here, alone with you. What do you think that makes her?" Catherine saw Jackson's fist clench, saw the violence coiling in his shoulders, and she stepped forward before blood could be shed. "It makes me a woman with choices," she said, her voice ringing clear across the yard. "Something I never had with you. I choose to stay here. I choose Mr. Reeves. And if you don't leave right now, I'll tell everyone in town exactly why you go through mail-order brides so quickly. Because you're cruel and small, and no woman in her right mind would stay with you willingly." Frederick's face flushed dark with rage. "You little— leave." Jackson's voice was deadly calm. "Before I forget, I'm a civilized man." For a long moment, the outcome balanced on a knife's edge. Then Frederick spat in the dust and remounted his horse. "You'll regret this. Both of you." They rode off in a cloud of dust and fury, and Catherine found herself shaking so hard she had to sit down on the porch steps. Jackson crouched beside her, his hands hovering but not touching, like he was afraid she'd break. "Are you all right?" "No." Catherine's laugh was slightly hysterical. "He could ruin my reputation, yours too. People will talk." "Let them talk." Jackson's hand finally touched her shoulder, warm and steady. "Catherine, look at me." She met his eyes, those storm-colored eyes that had seen her from the first moment, and saw something there that made her breath catch. "I don't care what people say," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I care about you, about what you want. Do you want to go back to town, find respectable work, protect your reputation? I'll help you. I'll give you references, money for a shop, whatever you need. And if I want to stay—" Jackson's breath hitched. Then you stay. But Catherine, I need to be honest with you. I don't want you here as just my housekeeper anymore. I want more. I want everything, but I won't push. I won't take advantage of your situation, so you need to tell me, what do you want? Catherine's heart pounded so hard, she thought it might burst from her chest. What did she want? She'd spent so long just surviving, just getting through each day, that she'd forgotten she was allowed to want things. I want to stay, she whispered. I want this, the ranch, the work, you. I want to wake up every morning and see those mountains. I want to sit on this porch every evening and watch the sunset. I want to be here, Jackson, with you. Catherine. Her name on his lips was a prayer and a promise. I'm 42 years old. I'm broken and grieving and half wild. I live 10 miles from civilization on land that's hard and unforgiving. I can't give you the easy life you deserve. I don't want easy, Catherine interrupted, her hand coming up to cup his scarred jaw. I want real. I want honest. I want you. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. Catherine kissed him back with all the hope and hunger and desperation she'd been holding inside. And when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jackson pressed his forehead to hers. Marry me, he said, not because you need protection or security. Marry me because I love you, because you make this empty house feel like home again, because I want to spend every evening on this porch with you, watching the sunset, until we're both too old to make it up the steps. Tears streamed down Catherine's face, but they were good tears, healing tears. Yes. God, yes. They married 3 weeks later in the little church in Copper Ridge, with Tom and Miguel as witnesses and half the town in attendance, partly from goodwill, partly from curiosity about the mail-order bride who'd been rejected and the widower who'd found love again. Frederick Whitmore didn't attend, but Catherine heard he'd left town shortly after their engagement was announced, moving on to easier prey. The wedding was simple. Catherine wore a dress she'd sewn herself from fabric Jackson had bought in town, deep green that brought out the gold in her eyes. Jackson wore his best suit, his dark hair slicked back, his scarred face solemn as he spoke his vows. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson kissed her with tender possession, and Catherine felt something broken inside her finally heal. The ranch hands had decorated the house with wildflowers and hung lanterns from the porch beams. That night, as Catherine stood in her new bedroom, their bedroom, looking at the mountains painted silver by moonlight, Jackson came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. No regrets, he murmured against her hair, only that I wasted time being afraid. Catherine turned in his arms, her hands sliding up his chest. Jackson, I need to tell you something. His expression grew wary. What? I'm not young. I might not be able to give you children. I know how much that mattered to Sarah, and I don't want you to think I deceived you. Stop. Jackson's hands framed her face, his thumbs wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I married you, Catherine. You, not your ability to bear children, not your age, not anything except the woman you are, strong and brave and beautiful. If we have children, wonderful. If we don't, that's wonderful too, as long as I have you. Even though I'm too old. The words came out broken, a wound still healing. You're not too old, Jackson said fiercely. You're perfect. You're exactly the right age, the right woman, the right everything. Frederick Whitmore is a fool and a coward, and I'm grateful to him for only one thing, being stupid enough to let you go so I could find you. Catherine kissed him then, deep and hungry, and Jackson responded with equal passion, his hands gentle but sure as he began to undress her. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies and boundaries, stopping when Catherine tensed and starting again when she nodded, Jackson whispering reassurances against her skin. Go slow, she whispered at one point, old fear rising. It hurts sometimes. I'll die before I hurt you. Jackson promised against her throat. "We go at your pace, always." And they did. And it was nothing like the brutal coupling Catherine had witnessed between her parents, nothing like the violence she'd feared. It was tender and patient and full of joy. And when they finally lay tangled together in the darkness, both breathless and satisfied, Catherine felt something she'd never experienced before: complete, perfect safety. The winter did come, harsh and isolating, with snow that piled 6 feet high and winds that howled like wolves. But inside the ranch house, Catherine and Jackson built a world of warmth and light. She taught him to dance in the kitchen while bread baked in the oven. He taught her to shoot, patient and steady, until she could hit a target at 50 yards. They worked together on the books, planned improvements for the spring, and made love in front of the fireplace while storms raged outside. In February, when the roads finally cleared enough for travel, Catherine rode into town with Jackson to visit the general store. Mrs. Henderson stopped them on the street, her expression uncertain. "Mrs. Reeves," she said carefully, "I heard you married Jackson. Are you happy?" Catherine understood the unspoken question. Was she safe? Was she cared for? Had she escaped one bad situation only to find another? "I'm very happy," Catherine said honestly, her hand finding Jackson's. "Happier than I ever thought possible." Mrs. Henderson's face relaxed into a genuine smile. "Good, that's good. You deserve it, both of you." As they walked back to the wagon, Jackson squeezed her hand. "People worry about you. They don't need to," Catherine said. "I'm exactly where I belong." Spring came with a riot of wildflowers and new calves, and Catherine threw herself into ranch life with renewed energy. She planted a garden, helped Jackson select horses for breeding, and began teaching young Charlie to read in the evenings. The ranch prospered under their joint management, and slowly, carefully, they built something beautiful from their shared loneliness. One evening in May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson, Jackson turned to Catherine with unusual seriousness. "Do you ever regret it? Coming west, I mean. Being rejected by Whitmore led you here, but it must have hurt." Catherine considered the question, really thought about it. A year ago, she'd stood on that train platform, humiliated and hopeless, with nowhere to go and no future ahead of her. Now she sat beside a man who loved her, on land that felt like home, doing work that mattered. "I used to think my story ended the day my father hit me one too many times, and I left with nothing but the clothes on my back," she said slowly. "Then I thought it ended again when Frederick Whitmore looked at me and said I was too old. But I was wrong both times. Those weren't endings, they were beginnings." Jackson pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. "Thank you." "For what?" For being brave enough to start again, for giving me a reason to do the same." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, two people who'd been broken and rejected, learning to be whole together. Catherine thought about the desperate woman who'd tried to trade an old cameo brooch for food, who'd been ready to give up everything for simple survival. She'd gained so much more than survival here. She'd found purpose, partnership, and love. "Jackson?" she said softly. "I'm not too old." He smiled, pulling her closer. "No, you're not. You're exactly right." And as the Montana sky blazed with stars and the wind carried the scent of sage and possibility, Catherine Hartwell Reeves finally understood what it meant to be home. 3 years later, Catherine stood on the same porch, watching Jackson teach their adopted daughter, 8-year-old Emma, orphaned when her parents died of cholera, how to ride. The girl's laughter rang across the valley like bells, and Jackson's patience was infinite as he guided her through the basics. Tom had married a girl from town and moved to the southern pasture with his bride. Miguel had become Jackson's foreman, and young Charlie had grown into a confident young man who'd taken over managing the horse breeding program. The ranch had doubled in size, and Catherine's garden supplied vegetables for both their household and several families in town. Catherine touched her stomach, feeling the flutter of movement there, unexpected, miraculous, and arriving when she'd finally stopped hoping. She was 35 and pregnant, and the doctor said everything looked healthy. She hadn't told Jackson yet, had been waiting for the right moment. He rode up to the porch now, lifting Emma down from the saddle with easy strength. The little girl ran inside, chattering about her riding lesson, and Jackson climbed the steps to his wife. "You have that look," he said, brushing a kiss against her temple. "What look? The look that says you're keeping secrets." His hand settled on her waist, and Catherine saw the moment he understood. His eyes widened, dropping to her stomach. "Catherine, 4 months along, the doctor confirmed it last week." She watched emotions chase across his face. Shock, joy, fear. "I know we said it didn't matter, and it doesn't, but—" Jackson kissed her deep and thorough, then dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead against her stomach. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for everything." Catherine ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full it ached. "We built this together," she said softly. "Everything we have, everything we are, we built it together." And that was the truth of it. She'd come west expecting to be someone's wife, someone's property, someone's solution to loneliness. Instead, she'd become a partner, a mother, a rancher, a woman who knew her own worth. She'd been rejected for being too old and found something better than acceptance. She'd found belonging. That night, after Emma was tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Catherine and Jackson sat on their porch one more time, watching the stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Catherine asked. "When I tried to pay for the meal?" Jackson smiled. "I told you to eat first. We'd talk after. Before that, in your eyes, you looked at me like I mattered. You did matter. You do matter." He pulled her against his side, his hand resting protectively over their unborn child. "You're not property, Catherine. You never were. You're a person worth saving, worth loving, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." Catherine leaned into his warmth, surrounded by the life they'd built from rejection and loss. She'd traveled across a continent to find a home, and found something infinitely better. She'd found herself. The mountains stood eternal in the distance, and the stars blazed overhead, and in the valley between, two people who'd been broken separately had learned to be whole together. The baby arrived on a crisp November morning when the aspens had turned to gold and the first snow dusted the mountain peaks. Catherine's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Jackson paced the hallway outside their bedroom, his face white with fear, remembering another woman, another time when he'd been powerless to help. But Catherine was stronger than she looked. She'd survived her father's fists, crossed a continent alone, built a life from rejection. She would survive this too. And when the baby's first cry split the dawn air, Jackson burst into the room to find his wife exhausted but triumphant, cradling a red-faced, squalling infant against her chest. "A boy," the doctor said, washing his hands in the basin. "Healthy lungs on him." Jackson knelt beside the bed, his hand trembling as he touched the baby's impossibly small fingers. "Catherine, he's perfect." "We're calling him Thomas," Catherine said, her voice hoarse but firm. "After your father." Jackson's eyes filled with tears he didn't bother to hide. His father had died when he was 15, worked to death on another man's ranch, but he'd been a good man, a kind man. To have his name carried forward felt like redemption. Emma burst into the room then, having waited as long as her 8-year-old patience allowed. "Is that my brother? Can I hold him?" Catherine smiled, exhausted but radiant. "Gently. Support his head." Jackson lifted Emma onto the bed beside Catherine, and together they showed her how to cradle the baby. The sight of his two children, one adopted from tragedy, one born from hope, alongside the woman who'd transformed his life, made Jackson's throat tight with emotion. "We're a family," Emma whispered, awestruck. "Yes, we are," Catherine agreed, her free hand finding Jackson's. "A real family." The first months with a newborn were exhausting. Catherine had forgotten how little sleep a baby required its parents to have, and Jackson proved surprisingly adept at midnight feedings and diaper changes. He'd pace the house with Thomas against his shoulder, singing old trail songs in his rough baritone until the baby quieted. Emma was a devoted big sister, always wanting to help, and the ranch hands treated the baby like he was part theirs too. Miguel carved a small horse from wood. Tom's wife knitted tiny sweaters, and Charlie hovered anxiously whenever Catherine carried Thomas outside, convinced she'd drop him. "I've carried feed sacks heavier than this baby," Catherine laughed. "I think I can manage." But there were difficult moments too. One February night, Thomas developed a fever that spiked frighteningly high. Catherine held him in a cool bath while Jackson rode through a blizzard to fetch the doctor, and for 6 terrifying hours they thought they might lose him. Jackson sat beside the basin, his hand on Catherine's shoulder as she worked to bring down the fever, and his mind spiraled to dark places, all the ways fate could rip happiness away, all the fragility of the life they'd built. "He's strong," Catherine said, though her voice shook, "like his father. He'll fight this." "Sarah died of a fever," Jackson said quietly. "I couldn't save her." Catherine looked up at him, her eyes fierce despite her exhaustion. "You're not losing anyone tonight. I won't allow it. Thomas needs you. Emma needs you. I need you. So we're all staying right here, together, understood?" The certainty in her voice steadied him. When the doctor finally arrived and confirmed it was just a common childhood fever, nothing deadly, Jackson had to step outside and lean against the porch post, shaking with relief. Catherine found him there later, after Thomas was sleeping peacefully. She wrapped a blanket around his shoulders and pressed against his side. "You can't control everything," she said softly. "I know you want to protect us, keep us safe from every possible harm, but life doesn't work that way. All we can do is love each other fiercely and face whatever comes together." Jackson pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I'm terrified of losing you. Any of you. I know. I'm terrified too. But Jackson, look what we've survived already. Your grief, my rejection, winters and fevers, and Frederick Whitmore. We're still here. We're still standing. That has to count for something." It did count for something. It counted for everything. Spring brought new challenges. A portion of their northern fence was destroyed by a fallen tree during a storm, and 20 head of cattle wandered onto disputed territory, claimed by Harrison Cole, a neighboring rancher with a reputation for violence and a long-standing grudge against Jackson over water rights. Jackson discovered the cattle missing during a routine check and followed their tracks to Cole's property line. What he found there made his blood run cold, his cattle penned up in Cole's corral, and Cole himself standing in the yard with a rifle across his arms. "Those are my cattle, Cole. I'm taking them back." Harrison Cole was a thick-set man with mean eyes and a smile like a knife wound. "These cattle were on my land. That makes them mine by right of capture. They wandered through a downed fence. I've got hands repairing it now. The cattle are mine and I'm taking them." "You in what army, Reeves?" Cole's men emerged from the barn, 5 of them, all armed. "Seems to me you're outnumbered." Jackson's jaw tightened. He'd brought Tom and Miguel with him, but 3 against 6 weren't good odds, especially when the law was 3 hours away and Cole had a reputation for shooting first. "I don't want trouble," Jackson said carefully. "Just want what's mine." "Then you should have kept better fences." Cole spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Besides, I hear you got a new baby at home. Be a shame if something happened to you out here, leaving that pretty wife of yours a widow again." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Jackson's hand moved toward his gun, and Cole's men tensed. "Let me propose something." Cole continued, his voice oily with false friendliness. I'll give you your cattle back, but you sign over your water rights to the Eastern Creek. That's fair trade, seems to me. The creek's been part of my land for 20 years, and it could be part of mine starting today. Your choice, Reeves, cattle and creek or just cattle, but you don't leave here with both. Jackson's mind raced. The Eastern Creek was crucial for their summer pasture. Without it, they'd have to move cattle farther north, which meant more work, more risk. But he also knew Cole would follow through on his threats. The man had killed before, nothing proven, but whispered about. I'll need to think about it, Jackson said finally. Discuss it with my wife. Cole's grin widened. You do that. But them cattle stay here until I get an answer. And Reeves, don't take too long. Might get hungry and decide to butcher one for supper. The ride back to the ranch was silent and tense. When they arrived, Catherine took one look at Jackson's face and sent Emma to play in the barn with the kittens. What happened? Jackson told her everything, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. I can fight him, but he's got more men. I can go to the law, but by the time the sheriff gets here, Cole could have moved the cattle or claimed I sold them to him, or I can give him the creek and get our property back. Or, Catherine said slowly, we find another option. There is no other option. There's always another option. Catherine's mind was already working. That sharp intelligence that had kept her seamstress shop afloat for years now applied to ranch politics. Cole wants the creek because his southern pasture dries up in summer. But what if he had access to water another way? I'm not following. Catherine pulled out the survey maps they kept in Jackson's office, spreading them across the kitchen table. Her finger traced property lines, water sources, elevation changes. Look, Cole's southern boundary runs along this dry wash, but during spring runoff, it carries water from the mountain snowmelt. What if we helped him build a catchment system there, dig a holding pond, maybe a small dam? Give him the water access he needs without giving up your creek. Jackson stared at the maps, hope kindling in his chest. That could work, but why would he accept help from me? Because you're going to make it worth his while. Catherine's smile was sharp. You're going to offer him first pick from your next batch of colts. Charlie's been breeding excellent stock and Cole knows it. Water rights and a quality horse, he'd be stupid to refuse. And if he does refuse, Catherine's expression hardened, then we fight. But we fight smart, not with guns. We document everything, get witnesses, take it to the territorial court if we have to. Cole thinks he can bully you because you're alone. But you're not alone anymore. You have me, you have our hands, you have half the town who respects you. We'll bury him in paperwork and testimony until he chokes on it. Jackson pulled her into his arms, laughing despite the situation. Remind me never to cross you. Smart man. She kissed him quickly. Now go make the offer. Take Miguel and Tom as witnesses. Be respectful but firm, and Jackson, don't let him see you're afraid. Men like Cole feed on fear. The next day, Jackson rode back to Cole's property with his proposal. He half expected to be shot on sight, but Cole heard him out, suspicion warring with greed on his weathered face. You'd help me build a catchment system and give me a colt? First pick from the spring foals. I'll even throw in help with the construction. My men, my materials. All I want is my cattle back and my creek left alone. Cole was silent for a long moment, calculating. Finally, he spat and nodded. Deal. But the colt better be worth it, Reeves. And if that catchment system fails, I'm coming for your creek anyway. It won't fail, Jackson said with more confidence than he felt. You have my word. They shook on it, and Jackson got his cattle back that afternoon. Over the next month, he and his hands helped Cole dig the holding pond and construct a basic dam system. It was backbreaking work, but it solved the problem, and grudgingly, Cole began to respect him for it. Your wife's idea? Cole asked one afternoon, watching the water pool in the new catchment. She's smart. She's a damn sight more than smart. Cole wiped sweat from his forehead. Heard she was a mail-order bride. Frederick Whitmore's reject. Jackson's jaw tightened, but Catherine's advice rang in his head. Don't let them see you're afraid. Best thing Whitmore ever did was be too stupid to recognize quality. Saved her for me. Cole laughed, rough and genuine. Guess that's one way to look at it. When Jackson told Catherine about the conversation later, she smiled. Good, let them talk. Let them know I'm not just your wife, I'm your partner. It'll make them think twice before crossing us again. And it did. Word spread about how Catherine had outsmarted Cole, and the other ranchers began to see the Reeves Ranch differently. Not just Jackson's operation, but a partnership, a force to be reckoned with. That summer brought another challenge, this one closer to home. Emma, now 9 years old, began asking questions about her birth parents, who they were, how they died, whether she looked like them. Catherine answered as honestly as she could, showing Emma the few belongings that had survived the cholera outbreak, a locket with faded photographs, a worn Bible with family names inscribed. Do you think they'd be proud of me? Emma asked one evening, sitting on the porch between Catherine and Jackson. I know they would be, Catherine said firmly. You're brave and kind and smart. Any parent would be proud. But I don't remember them. Emma's voice was small. Sometimes I try, but I can't remember my mother's face. Does that make me bad? Jackson lifted her onto his lap, though she was getting almost too big for it. You were very young when they died. It's not bad that you don't remember, it's just how memory works. But Emma, listen to me. Your birth parents loved you, and they'd want you to be happy. They'd want you to have a family who loves you, and we do love you. So much it hurts sometimes. Even though I'm not really yours? Catherine's hand found Emma's. You are really ours. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. We chose you, and you chose us, and that makes us just as much a family as any other. Emma thought about this for a moment, like how Jackson chose you even though you weren't young anymore. Catherine laughed, surprised. Yes, exactly like that. Then I guess being chosen is better than being born into something, Emma said thoughtfully, because it means people want you on purpose. That's exactly right, Jackson said, his voice rough with emotion. We want you on purpose, little bird. Always have. Always will. But the conversation planted seeds of worry in Catherine's mind. As Emma grew older, she'd face questions about her origins, possibly prejudice from people who valued blood ties above all else. And Thomas, too, would grow up knowing his sister was adopted. Would there be rivalry, resentment? She shared her concerns with Jackson one night after the children were asleep. He listened quietly, then pulled her close. We can't control how other people react, he said, but we can control how we raise them. Emma will always know she's loved, that she belongs here. And Thomas will grow up understanding that family is built, not just born. They'll be fine, Catherine. They have you as a mother, and that means they'll be strong enough to face anything. Do you have a lot of faith in me? I have all my faith in you. He kissed her forehead. You survived your father, survived being rejected and alone, survived building a life from nothing. Our children are lucky to have that strength as an example. Catherine held on to those words in the months that followed, as Emma navigated the sometimes cruel social waters of the town school. As Thomas grew from a baby into a rambunctious toddler, she held on to them when Emma came home crying because another girl said adopted children weren't real family, and Catherine sat with her daughter and explained that people fear what they don't understand, but that didn't make them right. You're my real daughter, Catherine said fiercely, in every way that matters, and anyone who says otherwise doesn't deserve your tears. Emma wiped her eyes, her chin lifting in a gesture so like Catherine's own stubborn pride that it made Jackson smile from the doorway. Then I won't cry any more. I'll just prove them wrong. That's my girl. The years continued to pass, marked by seasons and small triumphs. The ranch prospered under Jackson and Catherine's joint management. Emma learned to ride like she'd been born on a horse, and Thomas followed his sister everywhere, chattering constantly. Catherine's sewing skills became legendary in town. She took commissions for wedding dresses and Sunday best, earning money she carefully saved for the children's future. Jackson expanded the horse breeding operation until Reeves Ranch became known for quality stock throughout the territory. He taught Emma everything he knew about ranching, never once suggesting that being a girl should limit her learning. Catherine watched her daughter transform from a grieving orphan into a confident young woman and felt pride swell in her chest. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Jackson surprised Catherine with a trip to Helena, just the two of them, with Emma and Mrs. Henderson watching the children. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in restaurants with white tablecloths, and Jackson bought Catherine a new dress from a shop that sold Eastern fashions. "You didn't have to do this," Catherine said, fingering the soft blue silk. "I wanted to." Jackson pulled her close in their hotel room, his hands settling on her waist. "You work so hard, Catherine. At the ranch with the children, with your sewing. You deserve something beautiful just for you." "I have something beautiful," she said, looking up at him. "I have you. I have our family. That's more than I ever dreamed possible." "Still," he kissed her softly, "every time I see you, I remember that desperate woman who walked into my restaurant trying to trade a cameo for food. And I'm grateful, so damn grateful, that Frederick Whitmore was fool enough to reject you." Catherine smiled against his lips. "Best rejection of my life." Indeed, they made love that night with the leisure of people who didn't have to listen for crying babies or early morning ranch work. And afterward, lying tangled in expensive hotel sheets, Catherine felt something close to perfect contentment. "I never thought I could be this happy," she admitted in the darkness. "After my father, after Boston, after standing on that train platform feeling like my life was over, I never imagined this." Jackson's arms tightened around her. "Your life wasn't over. It was just beginning. You just didn't know it yet." "Neither did you." "No," he agreed. "I thought my life ended when Sarah died. Thought I'd just exist, going through the motions until I joined her. But then you walked into my restaurant looking fierce and frightened and so damn proud, and something in me woke up again. You saved me, Catherine, just as much as I saved you." She turned in his arms to face him, her hand cupping his scarred jaw. "We saved each other," she corrected. "That's what makes it real. Not one person rescuing another, but two broken people choosing to heal together." "Together," Jackson echoed, and kissed her again. When they returned to the ranch, they found Emma had managed everything perfectly in their absence, feeding chickens, helping with Thomas, even resolving a dispute between two of the ranch hands over a poker game. Miguel reported that she'd been calm, fair, and remarkably mature for a 12-year-old. "You did wonderfully," Catherine told her that evening. Emma beamed with pride. "I want to help more, really help, not just with little things. I want to learn the business side, like you know." Catherine and Jackson exchanged glances. It was unusual for a girl to be interested in ranch management, even more unusual for parents to encourage it, but they'd never been conventional. "All right," Jackson said. "Starting tomorrow, you work with your mother and me on the books. Learn how we budget, plan, make decisions. But Emma, this means real responsibility. You can't lose interest halfway through." "I won't," Emma promised. "I want to understand how all of this works, how you built it." So Emma became their apprentice in earnest, learning not just the physical work of ranching, but the mental chess game of business, when to buy and sell, how to negotiate, who to trust. She had a natural head for numbers and an instinct for reading people that served her well. By the time she was 14, Emma was helping manage the books, and by 16 she was negotiating with buyers in town. Some of the other ranchers were scandalized. A young woman handling business deals, but they couldn't argue with results. Emma was sharp, fair, and never let anyone cheat the Reeves Ranch. Thomas, meanwhile, grew into an energetic boy who loved the physical work of ranching, riding, roping, working with the horses. He adored his older sister and followed Emma everywhere, much to her alternating amusement and annoyance. "Someday, you'll be grateful to have a business partner," Catherine told Emma one evening when she was complaining about Thomas's constant presence. "You think he'll want to work the ranch with me?" "I think you'll work it together," Jackson said. "Emma running the business side, Thomas handling the operations. You'll be a good team." Emma considered this, then smiled. "Yeah, we will be." Catherine watched her children, both of them hers in every way that mattered, and felt the rightness of it settle in her bones. This life they'd built from rejection and loss, from desperate circumstances and unlikely love, it was real and solid and good. One autumn evening, when Emma was 17 and Thomas was 6, the family sat together on their porch watching the sunset. It had become their tradition, this quiet time together before night fell, and Catherine treasured these moments. "Tell us the story," Thomas demanded, snuggling against Catherine's side. "Which story, little love?" "How you and Papa met, when you were too old." Emma laughed. "She wasn't too old, dummy. That mean man just said she was." "I know," Thomas said with the patience of someone who'd heard the story many times. "But that's my favorite part, when Papa saw her and knew the mean man was wrong." Jackson reached across to ruffle Thomas's hair. "Want to know a secret? When I first saw your mother, I didn't think about whether she was young or old. I just thought she was the bravest person I'd ever seen, standing there in my restaurant, hungry and scared and desperate, but refusing to break. That's what made me notice her, her strength." "And then you gave her food," Thomas continued. "And then she came to the ranch, and then you fell in love." "Not quite that fast," Catherine said, smiling at the memory. "We had to learn to trust each other first, had to become friends before we could become anything else." "But you did become something else," Emma said softly. "You became a family, even though neither of you planned it." "Best surprise of my life," Jackson said, pulling Catherine close. They sat together as the stars emerged. 4 people who'd found each other through circumstances that should have broken them. 2 orphans, one literal, one emotional, and 2 adults who'd rebuilt their lives from ruins. They weren't perfect, and their life wasn't easy, but they were real and honest and deeply, profoundly loved. And that, Catherine thought as Thomas drowsed against her shoulder and Emma chatted with Jackson about tomorrow's work, was worth more than any fairy tale ending could ever be. Years would bring more challenges, droughts and harsh winters, Thomas breaking his arm falling from a horse, Emma's first heartbreak over a boy who didn't deserve her, the slow march towards statehood and all the changes it would bring. But they would face it all together, this family built not from blood alone, but from choice and courage and love that refused to surrender. Catherine had been rejected for being too old, cast aside as used up and worthless. But she'd found something the young mail-order brides never had, a partnership built on mutual respect, a love that grew from friendship, a family that chose each other every single day. She wasn't too old. She'd been exactly the right age, at exactly the right time, to meet exactly the right person, and that made all the difference. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Catherine and Jackson's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.